and then we can sort of publish those. Great.
So,
yeah.
Dr. Praveen, just one more thing. So as Sushma ma'am was asking, now nobody else can be a part of this panelist group, but can any of our participants just type in answers to certain questions on the chat box or via the question and answer tab?
Yeah. So Maria, I mean, if somebody types in the chat or puts in a question in the chat, then the other participants can enter it. Whereas if somebody has raised it as a question, then other participants won't be able to see the questions unless we sort of post it or we answer it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. But if there is some question that, so yeah, if there is some question that that you need some of your team members to answer, then you can dismiss that, and we can later we can sort of get back to it. So in the blog or something like that, we can write the questions and we can respond with answers.
Sure. Thanks.
Great. So we have 10 minutes. Maybe I will allow everybody to stretch and prepare. So maybe we'll join 3 minutes or 4 minutes before the talk. So we don't have to switch off, or we don't have to turn off the Zoom or go out of the Zoom. We can just switch off our videos. Any queries, please? I'm here, so please do let us know. Gunjan, anything else that we need to take care?
That's it. I will make the webinar live at 5:55.
Okay.
Yeah.
5:55. Okay, yeah. That's fine.
Yes. Great.
So, or Gunjan, so would you wait for till 6 o'clock before some participants join? I mean, or I don't know.
Maybe two to 3 minutes earlier we can make it live, so for the participants to join in.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Bye. See you soon.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Kayla. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, we were just, all other participants have presentations, so we had a quick round of run so that, we were just checking whether things were going good.
Okay. I don't know how to turn this video background around so it's backwards.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make it the right one. Should I just, can you see it normally?
Yeah, it's normal. It's normal. You can, the banner is the webinar banner is your background, so we can see it here.
Okay, fine.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
Good evening. Praveen here.
How are you? Yes, I see you. Nice to see you.
Same here. So, Kayla, we have 10 minutes of presentation, and then we have a question and answer session at the end. So, yeah, and then we have a Q&A section at the bottom. So participants would be sort of writing the questions here, and if you can respond directly, you can respond. If not, then I can take those questions towards the end. But if there are some questions which you feel are irrelevant, then maybe you can just dismiss them.
Sure.
Great. So we are joining just, I mean, we are online, but we will go live, I think 2-3 minutes before 6. So any queries?
Okay.
Anything you want to ask?
No, I don't have the most recent agenda. Can you just run through quickly, like when people are speaking, just quickly summarize?
Sure. So the I think you're the first speaker. So I'll be doing the introductions and then you will be the first speaker supporting communities to mitigate COVID-19 risk. And then you will be followed by Maria and then Santilal sir and then Susma and then Joseph and for 10 minutes each. And towards the end, we have 25 minutes for discussions.
Okay, so and I'm focused, I hope this is correct, on the questions that you had sent me originally about prioritizing activities, the role of international agencies, et cetera. Yes?
That's right. Perfect.
All right.
Yep.
Perfect. Then I'll be right back then. Okay.
Sure.
Praveen, I have just put my banner, so I'm just trying to test it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, it's perfect, ma'am.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, thanks.
Gunjan, I see that I see a message that you're in a practice session.
Yeah, it's a practice session. Can I go live now? It's 5:58.
Have any participants joined?
Not yet. Until I enable the practice session, till the time no one can join. Like I have to start the webinar for that. This is a practice session which is going.
Sure. Please go ahead.
I guess we can go live, right?
Yeah.
We are live now.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants from all over the globe. I see that the participants number are still increasing. So maybe we'll just give a minute or so for everybody to join and then we can start. Great. Good evening, everyone, again. And it's wonderful to have you all in this pleasant evening. My name is Praveen, and I lead the primary healthcare program at the George Institute based in India. I'm also the director of the Secretariat for the Primary Healthcare Research Consortium, which works towards improving primary healthcare research in low and middle income countries and is hosted at the George Institute. Today, we will be discussing key learnings and lessons from our implementing partners for mitigating COVID-19 risk in urban slums. Populations living in slums are particularly vulnerable to COVID and its economic and social impacts, given their crowded living conditions, limited access to basic sanitation and health services, the inadequate waste management, reliance on crowded transport services, and of course, specific aspects of working in informal sector. Mumbai and Chennai, the two major cities in India and home for nearly 10 million people, have seen rapid spread of COVID-19 infection in urban slum areas in the initial period, that is April 2020, and it has become imperative for supporting grassroots organizations in these areas to strengthen community-led responses to address COVID-19 challenges. Because of this, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had extended its support to 4 organizations, 3 in Mumbai and 1 in Chennai, to expand their reach to help communities fight and contain the challenges of COVID-19. The George Institute has also joined this effort as a learning partner to document various activities that are taking place. The past year offers some lessons on factors, facilitators, and barriers that impede the onslaught of COVID-19 pandemic. And these learnings, we hope, will help in better planning of mitigation strategies for future. As a team, all of our partners have been having these meetings once every month, where we keep on sharing the learnings that we learned from our fieldwork. We thought it would be good to organize a webinar and spread the learnings, at least the initial learnings, to all concerned. Today, the representatives from 4 partner organizations will share their experiences on working with communities during COVID-19. We all can see a question and answer session box toward a question and answer session box at the bottom. So towards the end of this webinar, we will have a question and answer session, and we will discuss the question and answers that are written in this box. I would request the participants to please put in any of your questions in this box below and not to put it in the chat. If there is some time after each presentation, I will try to accommodate 1 or 2 questions and we will discuss. Without any further ado, let me invite our first speaker, Dr. Kayla Lazarson. She is the Deputy Director for Infectious Diseases and Vaccine Delivery at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation India office. Her focus areas include tuberculosis, visceral leishmaniasis, lymphatic filariasis, dengue, malaria, and vaccine delivery. Since March 2020, she has been leading the COVID-19 response for the India BMGF office. Dr. Kayla will speak to us about how the foundation extended the support to urban informal settlements across different regions over a short period of time. Kayla, over to you.
Great, thank you, and good evening and afternoon to all. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how the foundation, the Gates Foundation, worked during COVID, including with the urban partners and urban communities. So our goal when COVID started was really to be as responsive to government need as possible. And so what that meant was that we really wanted to obviously curb the impact of COVID and deploy our resources to protect at-risk and vulnerable populations and to be responsive to evolving government needs, which really did change quite a bit over time. So we were changing over time as well, and to protect vulnerable populations with equitable, timely, and scaled delivery of logistics. In the very beginning, there was a lot of logistics and procurement, moving to diagnostics, treatment, and then ultimately vaccines. And it's been an evolving process, and it's been where we have believed and been asked to participate where the need is greatest. In that regard, the urban communities was an area that, although our India country office isn't majorly focused in urban communities, we have felt that that's a growing need. And as it became a need in COVID, we were able to pivot some of our partners, some of our relationships to be able to work in COVID in the urban communities. So some of the work that we were able to do was in a number of buckets. The first was health system strengthening, which was to really empower the local healthcare workers and to build up emergency operations capacity. That was sort of some of our first work to really kind of help in preparing for emergency operations. We then moved into surveillance and management of data, of systems, of logistics within a very big focus within UP and Bihar, and then later within the urban communities. And this was to really ensure that we understood what was happening with COVID and that we could be responsive to the epidemiology of COVID, whether it was diagnostics, treatment, facilities. We have enough facilities, the tiered system of facilities, understanding quarantine, especially in urban communities. How was quarantine and isolation happening? How could it be streamlined? How could it be better deployed for the communities at risk to make it possible for people to get tested and to be quarantined safely, but in a way that was conducive to the lives of the different kinds of communities, some rural when we were in UP and Bihar, and of course urban in Chennai and in Mumbai. We then worked a lot in communication. So we spent a lot of time on trying to understand what were the communication needs. And this varied from anti-spitting campaigns to understanding, urban needs, to having an urban rap video, to make sure that the messages were getting out. There was gaming with the Lodo King and making a mask version, and then merging into just a full-on mask campaign with billboards and buses and everything else to really try and make sure that the message was getting out there, and that masks were essentially our vaccine until we had a vaccine. And so that was a really strong focus of our work on working to get materials online that people could use from anywhere, whether it was from the communities, whether it was from other international agencies, that we weren't being redundant, that everybody could access the same materials. There were posters and there were many languages, and it was a very important part of our contribution to COVID. And then as things moved, we've been trying to understand what are the needs, especially in the urban community in terms of vaccine hesitancy, what's happening, how can we help, how can we get the right messages out, how can we make sure that there are vaccine sessions, that they're monitored, how do we manage the issue where people were afraid to go out during the second wave to get their vaccine, and working on those issues. So our response has changed from those early procurement logistic days to later actually being able to work on vaccine hesitancy. And that's of course a big focus right now in what we're doing. And we were able to work in terms of the urban communities and as well as in UP and Bihar with partners. We already had partners that we knew that we could leverage quite quickly. Foundation funding is very nimble, so we were able to make grants quite quickly, and we were able to leverage work that was already being done and pivot it towards COVID very, very quickly to get the scaled response that we needed. At the same time, this is the last thing I'll say and I'll stop, is we were also very focused and have continued to be very focused on essential health services. So in the communities, it's around sanitation, it's around tuberculosis, it's around all the areas that also need focus during this time. UPM Bihar working with reproductive health, family planning, immunization, ensuring that those services stayed functional during COVID. And even if there was sort of a backslide during the waves, to kind of get it back up and again. And so again, pivoting with our international partners to and local domestic partners to pivot quickly for COVID and be able to be responsive. So maybe I'll stop there and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kayla. That's a wonderful insight. So what we can do is we can get back to you towards the end of the session when we have this discussion on various questions that might be asked.
Great, thank you.
So next we have Ms. Maria Lobo. Maria has been working with Spark for over 10 plus years as a coordinator and a professional consultant. She has extensive experience in working with communities in rural and urban areas in India. Spark is a non-governmental organization, as many of you know, and it has been working with the community since 1984 on issues of urban housing and infrastructure in partnership with two community-based organizations, the National Slum Dwellers Federation and Mahila Milan. So Maria from Spark will share Spark's learnings and observations about the needs of urban slum communities in context of COVID-19. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen. Good evening to everybody, and I really thank TGI and Gates for giving us this opportunity to bring to everybody the kind of work that we've been doing as part of this project. Before I begin my presentation, we have with us one of our Mahila Milan representatives, Selvi Divakar, and she'll speak for a few minutes on the kind of work that the communities have been doing. And after that, I will make a presentation. Selvi? Selvi?
हेलो
हाँ सेल्वी, आप बात कर सकते हो अभी 3 मिनट के लिए.
हाँ हाँ नमस्ते, मेरा नाम सेल्वी देवेंद्र. मैं जो गए कोविड के बारे में बोलना चाहूंगी. गए बार जो लॉकडाउन हुआ था उसमें जो हम लोगों को समस्या आई, जो हम लोगों को जो एक चैलेंज बोल के एक्सेप्ट करना पड़ा, उस बारे में हम थोड़ी बोलेंगे. हम लोगों को पता समझ में नहीं आ रहा था उस टाइम पे. अचानक से इतना बड़ा लॉकडाउन लग गया, क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं. हम लोग भी बहुत डर गए थे क्योंकि ऐसे ऐसे न्यूज में खबर आ रहे थे कि रोज इतने लोग मर रहे, इतने लोग पॉजिटिव. तो हम लोगों को कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा था. हम लोग भी डर के हमारे घर पे बैठ गए. 6-7 दिन तक तो बिल्कुल निकले नहीं. 7 दिन बाद हम लोगों को कॉल आने लगे. मजबूर लोग जो हमारे भरोसे, कुछ लोग जैसा हम लोग यहाँ एरिया में काम करते, सबको पता है कि एक समाज सेवा करने वाले इधर रहते, तो हम लोग को कॉल आने लगे कि मैडम हम लोग की बहुत हालत खराब है. जब हम लोग नीचे उतरे, जब देखे तो इतनी हालत खराब थी सबकी. लोग जो रोज कमाने खाने वाले, उनकी बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम, और सबसे ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम आया हेल्थ पे. जो लोग डायबिटीज के मरीज थे, टीबी के मरीज थे, और जो बीपी शुगर के लोग थे, उन लोगों को दवा खाने में ले नहीं रहे थे. बोले नहीं, इधर सेंटर बन गया है कोविड का, अभी हम लोग आपका इलाज नहीं करेंगे. आप जाओ राजावाड़ी जाओ, जे जाओ, आप लोग वहां पे जाओ, यहाँ पे मत आना. जो नजदीक एरिया में जो जिसके इलाज होते थे, तो वो लोग, उन लोगों की तबीयत और ज्यादा खराब हो गई इस डर से और इस माहौल से. लोग ऐसा अफवाह फैला दिए, जिसको हार्ट पेशेंट है, शुगर है, बीपी है, उसको ये कोरोना जल्दी पकड़ता है. तो वो थोड़ा भी उनकी तबीयत खराब होती तो वो डर जाते थे कि अभी हमारी मौत हो जाएगी. ऐसे डर के कई लोग की मौत हो गई हमारे एरिया में, कि डर के मारे उनको हार्ट आ गया और उनको नाम दिया गया कि कोरोना से मर गए. तो वो एक समस्या से हमको बहुत दिक्कत हुआ. लोग दवाखाने में, फिर हम लोग खुद उनके साथ जाने लगे कि इनको आप क्यों नहीं चेक कर रहे, इनकी बीपी शुगर आपका काम है, ये हर टाइम आपके पास फाइल लेके आ रहे, आप इनको क्यों भगा रहे. बोले ये सेंटर बन गया कोविड का मैडम, आप हम लोग इनको यहाँ पे नहीं ले सकते, आप इनको प्राइवेट में बताओ. प्राइवेट में जाने के लिए लोगों के पास पैसे, खाने को पैसे नहीं तो दवा को कहाँ से पैसे. उनको जो हर महीना उनका जो रोज का दवाई लगता है उसके पैसे के वांदे। तो हम लोगों को इस चीज के हेल्थ के लिए बहुत सारे समस्या है। और जहां तक रेशन पानी है, वहाँ हमारे काउंसलर, हमारे स्पार्क संस्था, हमारे एमएलए यहाँ के, उन्होंने खाने से लेके रेशन पानी, और रहा सवाल मास्क के लिए पैसा नहीं, हर जगह में बताया जाए मास्क यूज करो, घर में रहने वाले मास्क और सैनिटाइजर के बिना नहीं, छोटे बच्चों से बचने के लिए सैनिटाइजर यूज करो। लोगों के पास जब खाने पैसा नहीं तो इस चीज के लिए कहाँ पे पैसा लाएंगे। तो हमने कहा कि अपने अपने घर में जो कपड़े रखे हैं, जो आपने यूज नहीं किया है, उस कपड़े को कटिंग करके सिखाया गया। हमने, हमारे कोई संस्था आए थे, बोले मास्क किस तरीके से बनाते हैं, आप खरीद नहीं सकते तो घर में बना के उसको यूज करो। तो हमने ट्रेनिंग रखा इधर, तो मास्क कैसा बनाते हो, मास्क बनाने लगे लोग और अपने अपने घर में यूज करने लगे। तो इस तरीके से मास्क, सैनिटाइजर हम लोगों ने यहाँ के बीएमसी से ये किया कि हमारे घर घर में हम लोगों को सैनिटाइजर और साबुन दिया जाए। तो हमारे यहाँ के वार्ड ऑफिसर ने वो हमारी बात को रख के यहाँ पे हर एरिया को सैनिटाइजर और साबुन और मास्क दिया गया था। हर घर घर में जाके वार्ड के कुछ लोग आके अपने घर घर में जाके नाम लिख के उनको दिया गया। तो इस तरीके से हम लोगों ने आने गया लॉकडाउन में उसको चैलेंज किया, और उसमें हम लोगों को दिक्कतें तो बड़ी आई, लेकिन हम लोग फेस किए। जो पॉजिटिव आता था उनके लिए एम्बुलेंस मंगाते थे। तानाजी बोल के हम लोगों को वार्ड से एक डॉक्टर दिया गया था हेल्थ पे, तानाजी बोल के है, वो काम करेंगे। सेल्वी, आप कुछ भी रहेगा तो इनको कॉल कर सकते। तो हम उनको कांटेक्ट करते थे कि तानाजी सर यहाँ पे एक पेशेंट निकला, आप आके एम्बुलेंस भेज दीजिए, उनको लेके जाना है। तो उनके साथ हम लोग कोई ना कोई अलग गाड़ी में जाते थे और उनको पूरा एडमिट करने तक, उनको पूरा एडमिट करके उनके रिपोर्ट पूरा पहुंचाने तक हम लोग रह के उनको इस तरीके से मदद करके आते थे। क्योंकि उस टाइम पे ना कोई डॉक्टर हाथ लगाने को तैयार रहता था, हर एक चीज, ना कोई साथ देने के लिए, क्योंकि हर कोई डरा हुआ था। हम लोग किसी को दोष नहीं दे पा रहे थे, क्योंकि सब बोलते थे दूर रहो, किट मास्क पहनो तो अंदर आओ। तो उतनी हमारे पास कोई फैसिलिटी नहीं थी कि किट खरीदे और पूरा अपने आप को ये करके उनके पीछे दवाखाने में जाए। तो हम जितना हो सके कांटेक्ट में नगर सेवक, एमएलए और तानाजी सर, उनके कांटेक्ट में हम लोगों की मदद किए। रेशन की, मास्क की और सैनिटाइजर हमारे पूरे कॉलोनी में कराने लगे। कुछ लोगों के डर के वजह से हादसे हुए, मौत हो गई, लेकिन यहाँ पे और डर पैदा हो गया कि कोरोना से मर गए। यहाँ पे उनको टाइम से दवाई नहीं, और कई लोग माइग्रेन थे इधर, उन लोग फंसे हुए थे। उनके कुछ लोगों को सर्वे करके हम लोगों ने रेशन वगैरह, खाने पीने का 3 टाइम खाना हमारे एमएलए ने यहाँ पे अरेंज किया था। और वो हम लोग सर्वे करते थे, हर सोसाइटी को बोलते थे कौन मजबूर है, आपके इधर आया हुआ है, कहीं से आके फंसा हुआ है, उन लोगों को ये खाना मिलना चाहिए। तो हर बिल्डिंग में 15 से लेके 20 लोगों को हम लोग हर रोज 2 टाइम का खाना भेजते थे। फिर एक रमजान का आ गया, तो उसके बाद उनका इफ्तारी, उनका रोजा खोलने का, वो भी उन्होंने अरेंज करके दिया था हमको बीएमसी से और अपने तरफ से भी। एक टाइम से आता था बीएमसी से, एक टाइम से आता था एमएलए से। तो ये दोनों टाइम का हम लोग खाना भी उनको पुराते थे। पहली बात, हम लोग जो ज्यादा बीमार है, जिसके घर में खाने की कमी है और वो आदमी बीमार है, टीबी पेशेंट है, डायबिटीज है, उसको खाने में हम रेशन और खाना पहला ध्यान देके उस घर में पहुंचाते थे। तो इस तरीके से हम लोगों ने लॉकडाउन में काम किया। बहुत डेंजर सिचुएशन से निकले, और अभी ये इस लॉकडाउन में हमारे में इतनी हिम्मत थी, हमने बोला इतने बड़े इसमें से निकले तो इसमें से भी निकलेंगे। तो ये तो छोटा था, हम लोगों को इतना समझ में आया नहीं। गवर्नमेंट ने फैसिलिटी दिया था, टाइमिंग दिया था, इतने टाइमिंग में हर कोई, भले जहाँ 100 रुपया कमाने वाला 50 रुपया कमा लेता था इस टाइम के लॉकडाउन में, हम लोगों को इतनी दिक्कतें नहीं आई। लेकिन गया हुआ लॉकडाउन जो हुआ था उसमें हम लोगों को बहुत फेस करना पड़ा। हम लोगों को खुद को भी, जो हम लोग एक समाज सेवा रह के भी हमारे पास इतनी मुसीबतें आ पड़ी थी कि हम लोग हमारा देखे या पब्लिक का देखे। लेकिन उस टाइम पे हम लोग बाहर निकले और हमारे को मदद की है स्पार्क संस्था, हमारे शेखर सर, शर्मिला मैडम हमारे कांटेक्ट में रहते थे क्या। और यहाँ पे कुछ बिल्डिंग सील हो गए थे, 3 बिल्डिंग, उसमें से 10-10 मरीज निकले थे। कोई बिल्डिंग में 4 मरीज, कोई बिल्डिंग में 6, पूरी बिल्डिंग सील। उनको बाहर निकलने को गवर्नमेंट ने मना कर दिया, गेट लगा दिया। अब वो लोग खाएंगे क्या? तो हम लोग उस बिल्डिंग में भी पार्सल ऐसा पैकिंग करके उनको हम लोग गेट से देते थे, हाँ पहुंचाते थे, हैंड ग्लोव लगा के। हाँ मैडम।
हाँ सेल्वी, अपने पास टाइम कम है।
ओके ओके मैडम, मैंने मेन सब्जेक्ट पे बोल दिया है।
हाँ, मैं वापस आएंगे आपके पास।
ओके ओके ओके,
थैंक यू सेल्वी।
वेलकम।
So Yeah, I begin my presentation now. So SPARK stands for Society for Promotion of Area Resource Centers. And we've been working with two grassroots organizations, the National Slum Dwellers Federation and the Mahila Milan since 1984. We predominantly work with slum communities. Our goal is to increase capacity of communities to initiate and execute projects at community levels to establish a working relationship with professionals, financial agencies, politicians, and administrators, and to become a learning laboratory so others can learn from our experience. Now, this particular project was implemented in two wards of Mumbai, M East and G North. In G North, we focused more on Dharavi, and in M East, we were focusing on the relocation colonies, which is also from where people from different slum locations were moved into these permanent houses, as well as in slum areas of M East. So building strong local knowledge through robust data collection by the residents to assess the needs and challenges of communities during COVID was one of the major activities that we implemented in these two project locations. And this was done through different surveys undertaken by Mahila Milan and the federations at the local household level as well as at the larger community level. When we talk about the challenges that these communities faced during COVID, it has created a lot of fear amongst all class about food insecurity, about job insecurity, social insecurity, water and sanitation, health, and so on. And particularly in the urban sector, and specifically when we discuss urban poor, we find that these challenges are more predominant. On one hand, when everybody is talking about social distancing, we fail to acknowledge some very important facts pertaining to urban poor communities. For instance, a lack of data on these communities to come up with immediate solutions in cases like these, lack of space within their communities, within their homes, within their localities, make it all difficult for them to follow the so-called norms of social distancing. The other important challenge faced by communities was of water, access to water and sanitation. The poor condition of community toilet blocks on which majority of the slum population depends, inadequate water supply in community toilet blocks, make it unlikely to maintain hygiene. As a result, residents have been illegally constructing toilets within their homes without proper disposal mechanism, which also poses health risks. Coming to livelihoods, everybody knows how it has affected the urban poor. People's livelihood have been affected badly, especially in informal settlements where people earn on a daily basis, and with travel restrictions, they become more vulnerable. There were even stigmas associated with the poor living in slums. Because they are living in slums, they cannot be taken back to work as maids or taxi and auto drivers. And not only has it affected their livelihoods, it has also had a deep impact on the education and the future of children as well. No schools, online education with limited access to internet, interruption in studies when parents started going back to work again. We still haven't been able to put some systems in place where we can assure that this won't be interrupted as far as the children are concerned. Now, how do we resolve these challenges? So a lot of work by the Alliance of Spark, Mahila Milan and the Federation have been done in collaboration with the local corporators, the MLAs and the mayors, because the decentralization of power and resources varies at different levels within the administrative setup of a city. So while the local government has much to do, the leaders down the line, like the corporators, the MLAs, have a major role to play in providing responses to community needs, be it water, sanitation, health, food, etc. So leaders have achieved a lot by working in close collaboration with these people to support communities in lockdown. We've been providing them with cooked food, with food grains. They've been helping them out to get ration cards, especially for migrant and renters. Having campaigns to provide them with senior citizens card, provision of health checkup camps, provision of sanitation, provision of water and community toilet blocks, and so on. What we've also been doing to achieve individual toilets is in order to reduce physical distancing in crowded areas, is providing them with better sanitation facilities to control the spread of the virus. We began working with certain communities in the project locations where there was a need of individual toilets. We designed it for them, especially for the ones who did not have a toilet, while the others went ahead and got one for themselves in order to protect themselves from the virus. And when we designed these toilets, we also had a plan of providing for proper waste disposal. And now we are in a discussion with the municipality and the state government for subsidies that they could avail to achieve this. And this will also reduce the burden on the community toilets. In the sector of health, we've been able to organize, arrange for mobile vans, screening and testing for COVID and other comorbidities, informal training on using their own resources to help themselves. So like Selvi was talking about, using old clothes to make their own masks. Because very often, if there's no proper coordination between health authorities and the other departments dealing with issues of urban poor, we cannot see much of a change. And all of these, in some way, directly or indirectly, do affect the health of the communities. So we've been having a lot of conversations with different government officials in different sections and departments of the ward and the municipality to come up with interventions to control this virus. And how we were able to do, as I said, we've been having meetings at the ward level, at the community level, and with local corporators for water and sanitation interventions. And this is also part of our advocacy that we've been doing over the past years, building relationships with health providers to deal with COVID and other comorbidities, because TB was something that came out as a limelight when we were working around COVID. Involvement of communities at all levels was another area which was given a lot of importance. The kind of support that is required from different stakeholders is some kind of preparedness and early action to deal with some of these unintended consequences and emergencies. If right information is provided to the communities through proper channels. That will take away a lot of fear. Again, as Selvi was talking about, the kind of fear that people had when the lockdown started. And not only the communities, even us as middle class and high class people also had certain fears. Now, if we strengthening existing local groups and encouraging to be more formalized would also help bring in more solutions. There should be more efforts to protect or compensate for the loss of livelihood that people have gone during these emergencies. And last but not the least, improved health through various health interventions by local government, local political leaders, and municipalities are some of the areas where we would require the support of like-minded institutions, agencies, and organizations that are working with the communities. So thank you very much, and maybe we'll take up questions towards the end.
Thanks, Maria. That's a great insight about challenges turning into needs and involving communities to address their needs. So our next speaker is Sri Santilal Gulabchand Mutha, the founder chairman of Bharatiya Jain Sangatna, BJS, which is our second implementation partner. Sri Mutha is a distinguished social entrepreneur and strategic philanthropist. He established a flourishing enterprise with the noble intent of becoming self-sufficient for pursuing his dream of contributing to social welfare. He has thorough experience in the areas of social development, disaster response, and value-based education. BJS has extensive experience in conducting outreach camps for screening and managing COVID-19 cases. And Sri Mutha will now discuss about the best approaches for conducting the Dharavi model, that is tracing, tracking, testing, and treating. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Praveen, for giving us an opportunity to be with us in this webinar. The subject which is given to us is supporting communities to mitigate COVID risk, learning experience for tracing, tracking, testing, and treating approaches. So I just want to give an information in 1 minute of our organization. So we are 35 years old organization, and we work in disaster management, education, and social development. And in disaster management, in particularly right from Latur earthquake, we brought 1,200 orphan children to Pune, make them education for 10 to 15 years time. Jabalpur earthquake, our focus is children rehabilitation in all the disasters and the relief activities in all the disasters. Post Gujarat earthquake, we constructed 368 schools and handed over to government in just 90 days at the hand of the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Then maybe Akola flood, or there are a lot of floods and droughts which we have faced. Then in tsunami, we were in Andaman Nicobar Islands, constructed all primary health centers, sub-centers in all 34 islands of the Andaman Nicobar. Then in Jammu and Kashmir earthquake also, we did a lot of activities. We constructed shelters for there as per the government request for 15,000 people. Then we brought 500 orphan children from earthquake to Pune and make them education. Then Bihar floods and then COVID. And there are a lot of small disasters. So in all the disasters, our focus was to doing directly with the people, helping them, supporting them. However, with the support of government machinery. So whatever we do, we understand the policies and the working conditions of that area. And then we take permission and we work with the government hand in hand. So government machinery, we try to identify the gap. Where is a gap? And after identifying the gap, then we start our work with the government systems. So now I will just go into the COVID system. So in first lockdown, as Selvin and Maria explained in detail. So I will not go into the details of how there was a fear in the mind of the people of first lockdown March 20. So when we started, we are out of Pune, but our organization is working across the country. But however, saying that in Mumbai city, we have not worked before. And when we started this, when the lockdown started, then we thought that what we should do. So we found one gap that government has imposed lockdown, but all the doctors, private practitioners, all the people, they were in home only. So they were not supposed to go out. So all private clinics were also closed. So I thought that if somebody has some health issue, then where they will go? Because there is lockdown, they cannot go out of home. So then we come up with an idea of mobile dispensary seva. When floated the idea, concept was started, but there was not a single ambulance we could get in those days. Then we tried to brought some vans, school buses and other vans, but then drivers were not ready to come. Then volunteers were not ready to come. And since this is mobile dispensary, there should be a doctor, sister, and other paramedical staff also there. But it was very difficult in those days to get this type of human resources for them. Even getting vehicles was also impossible because of drivers. So we started this mobile dispensary concept with Pune from 1st April 20. And when we started this mobile dispensary in Pune, we came to know that how we can mobilize the people. When we started checking, because tracing, tracking, treating, everything is there on the, there should be a facility. So for testing people and tracking people, we have to go to the people. And since there was a fear, suppose किसी को थोड़ी सी भी खांसी आती थी, तो खांसी आने के बाद में उसको लगता था मुझे कोरोना है. So people were not ready to come out. So in such type of a situation, when we started that doctor at your doorstep, we used to take our dispensary at, we discussed with the government, we got the permission from the state government, then we got the permission from the Pune Corporation, Pimpri-Chinchwad Corporation, and then after few days, 1 week successful operation in Pune, then we started, then I had a meeting with the respected Chief Minister of Maharashtra and the Sharad Pawar ji, that how BJS can support in Dharavi and how BJS can support in slums in Mumbai. Because first wave was maximum attacking in slums area and highly dense populated areas. So then after our meeting with the Chief Minister, we immediately started our activities. So how we can start in Mumbai? So before we start in Mumbai, we conducted some survey and we had some strategies. So if I want to go to Dharavi, how I can go? Then I discussed with local people that in whole Mumbai, how can I work? Then I approached CREDAI, who is a developers, builder, construction developers, builders association is CREDAI. I wanted that CREDAI should be our partner. Why? Because all these builders are spread across Mumbai city, all MMR region. Second thing, they are influenced people. They know government officials very well up to commissioner level. They know public representatives from corporator to MLAs to MPs to minister, everybody. And they have working force with them. So I started approaching them and I had a tie-up with them. I told them that what I want that wherever I will work, your team should be there to help us in all the slums, connecting all our corporators, whichever is the political party, all MLAs, MPs, and you should mobilize your human resources also. So we did that. And then we approached administration. We had a few meetings with administration. Then we approached Dharavi people, Dharavi representatives. Education Minister of Maharashtra happened to be a assembly member from Dharavi. So we discussed with her. Then there was association of Dharavi Association Doctors, Ayush Doctors Association, DADA. Then we approached them. They told that, no, we are not going out and so much fear is there. Then we convinced them, we will give you dispensary, we will give you medicines, we will give you PPE kits, we will support you by volunteer staff. You just go there and take your care and then start checking the people, testing the people. Then they started. Then we started mobile dispensary. So we could treat 1.4 million patients in Mumbai and Pune majoritarily. And the first wave was in the 80 to 85% of these numbers are only slums area numbers. So in Pune also, we were working with only slums. So when this lockdown started, so mobile dispensary seva we started from April, 1st April till 22nd of June. When government started unlock, then we have changed our model. That we don't want to go to the houses and doctor at doorstep. That was not required then after unlock. So then after unlock, we changed the strategy and we come up with all these mobile dispensary seva we converted into Mission Zero. So Mission Zero is doing antigen test. Since there is an unlock, then we have to go there and do the antigen test so that we can identify, we can trace the patients as early as possible. And if they are positive, we can isolate them immediately then and there only. So that's why we started this Mission Zero. So then we pull last slide. The commissioner of corporation, Chahal Saab, and all additional commissioners came and they started on this 22nd of June at Andheri Sports Complex. More than 100 vehicles we launched and we started this Mission Zero, which is conducting antigen test of all the people having health checkup first and then antigen test and then sending them to COVID care centers. Next. So in such a manner, when we started this antigen test, then also next slide. Then we tried to understand how people, because there were a lot of fear of testing. Corona is only a matter of 10 days. This whole pandemic, whole Corona disease is only 10 days. If you don't do anything for 8-10 days, and then the problem rises, and then you can go out of control. So ये सिर्फ 5 या 10 दिन का मामला है. So people were not ready. We used to have a lot of discussions with them, a lot of strategies we developed, how to convince people. Then we had this post-unlock, this Mission Zero, and we tried to conduct these antigen tests. So we could do antigen test for more than 5 lakh people, most of them in majority in Mumbai and Pune only. And then we did some RT-PCR test also. We are tied up with the private RT-PCR lab, and we used to do free of RT-PCR test for the slum peoples. Next. So after this Mission Zero, we came to know that there should be a good awareness everywhere, because awareness and behavior change must be there. So we started floating Prachar Raths. Prachar Raths means a Prachar Rath that goes to the slum area. There were dialogue, loudspeaker, there were a lot of songs and some jingles. And then people were announcing dialogue. In dialogue, one person says to another person, different stories we brought in dialoguing, and the people started coming. And after this awareness, again, we started an awareness by different channel. So he is the Honorable Health Minister of Maharashtra, Rajesh Tope. We invited him to our office, and I conducted his interview. At least 12 hours we had a shooting, and then we edited, and then we half an hour episodes we did, and Doordarshan and other channels, they have released these all behavioral change issues, all myths, all problems, all there were a lot of the things in people's mind. So we conducted interview and we floated through social media, floated through Doordarshan, floated through all other different government channels, everything. Not even that, even in Dharavi, people were not ready for testing. Then we convinced them. Then when we started this vaccination in Dharavi, there was not a single person. When the government started vaccination center, I requested administration to open special center for Dharavi. Then they open and sign hospital. Then after I request, open one more center. And then my team was there. We have this help vaccination help desk. We 10 to 15 desks we have started in Dharavi, and we told people that we supporting them for registration and all. Then you slowly registration increased in Dharavi, and we tried to contact all different types of NGOs in Dharavi, all associations from Dharavi, like Jeweler Association, because they are businessmen, all Traders Association, then Doctors Association, all such type of different associations we contacted, and we did lot of awareness programs in Dharavi, and in such a manner, not in Dharavi, because today also our team is there in Dharavi. In second spike, you see the whole Dharavi area people was just thinking that what will happen to Dharavi now this time. But God's grace that Dharavi is saved, and now everybody is safe over there. And still we are working, and in third spike also we are alert, and we are going to do a lot of things. So there are a lot of learnings in all these things. We have a lot of documented learning in last 25 all disasters, and we are now competent enough to face the third wave, even in Mumbai, all Mumbai slums and Mumbai city also, and Pune city also. We conducted some researches. There is one research report in Patil Estate, the slum in Pune, and we could share that report definitely, that how we can reduce the death ratio by aggressively tracking, tracing, and treating the people. And that research report is also available, third-party research. So these are our partners. They have supported us, like CREDAI MCHI, Desh Apnaiye, MQR, Sun Pharma, United Ways, ABP Maza as a media partner, and of course BMGF is our partner. So thank you very much for inviting us in this webinar and giving us an opportunity to showcase our learnings. Thank you very much, Praveen.
Thank you, Santilal sir. It's good to hear, that we need to address stigma and fear, not only of the community, but also of the care providers early on the disease, pandemic or epidemic. And it's not only the intention, but it's also, making it work, addressing complex challenges that your organization has done. And also remarkable is the flexible and agile approach that the organization has taken, making the resources work for different purposes, changing over a period of time. So that's a great insight, sir. So now our next speaker is Ms. Susma Sinde, who heads the Child Health and Nutrition Programs at Sneha. Susma is an anthropologist by training and has over 2 decades of experience in public health projects across tribal, rural, and urban settings. She has expertise in working with health systems and developing and implementing private-public partnerships. Susma will share how Sneha conducted various community-based campaigns to inculcate attitudinal changes, which are so important in Mumbai. Over to you, Susma.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Praveen, and very good evening to all. And I'll be sharing Sneha's experience building the communication strategy for Dharavi and during COVID times. So basically, role of behavioral change communication in Dharavi. So we can go to next slide, Ildo. So before I start, I would like to share a small case story from the field, which is basically during pandemics, it's very important to address the myths that the community has, because this myths actually creates the barriers to access the care. We had a group of women from our area who were reluctant to visit the any health facility, because when the COVID was on the peak during April and May time, they were actually not willing to go to the hospital in the fear that when they have the symptoms, in the fear that they will get either admitted or they will be asked to quarantine. And so we actually decided to, and one of our COVID yodhas who was actually trained by us and been told about how to access the healthcare facilities, she shared a positive experience that if you go to the health facility, it is not necessary all the time the same thing will happen to you. So rumors about the public health system and it is actually need to address there and there itself. And she managed to share a story that when she had a symptom and she visited the health facility, how her experience was positive or different, and she was managed to influence the behavior of the group. We can go to next, yeah. So Dharavi, everyone has spoken about how COVID affected the informal settlements. Dharavi was one of the very hardly areas, and it is very highly dense community with multi-religious and the multi-ethnic groups coexist. It's a multilingual culture in Dharavi. And if you see the data that is for the in May 2020, when COVID was at its peak, there were 48 cases were on an average reported from Dharavi. So you can imagine the situation in Dharavi in May, in the beginning of the first wave of the COVID. So we also did, before we started, when we started Dharavi mission, we did a telephonic survey, basically a baseline survey, just to understand what are the understanding of the community about the COVID, what are the behaviors that they're following. So one of the worrisome factors that we came to know is that 61% of the respondents perceived it as a very low risk or no risk at all. And misconceptions still exist, and there was a denial in the community about existence of COVID as a disease. Some of them, so when the new variant started coming in, the symptoms, knowing that there is a loss of smell and the test, very few people knew about it. So this is very important, and when we design the communication strategy, very important to know this findings. So we decided to address this, and with a goal to reach out to the vulnerable population with a more appropriate and correct and up-to-date information about COVID, including the preventive measures and also the service availability. Because most of the media are now talking about the preventive measures, but where to access the services was one of the important part of our communication strategies. It was actually based on the 3 pillars where Sneha has been working in Dharavi for last 20 years on various issues, domestic violence, child health, nutrition, and adolescent. So we had a large pool of community volunteers who are already been engaged with us. So we decided to work with them as our COVID warriors, because Sneha was not in the field because of the mobility restrictions. Second pillar was actually using the online and the offline channels of communication. And third was collaboration with public system. We covered around 75,000 population under the Dharavi mission program. Most of our communication material that we developed during was around COVID awareness for prevention, but we also addressed the fears. Many of our speakers spoke about fear, because coping with fear during pandemic is a very important aspect of your communication strategy. Also encouraging to seek care, because we really need to build that confidence and trust and work with the fear. Also self-care. Why self-care is important? So we built a lot of communication material around these themes, and we basically communicated to 3 sets of stakeholders. One is the community at large, which included vendors and the system stakeholders, public health, as well as the ICDS and the BMC sanitation department, because we worked on sanitation during pandemic. Influencers, which includes the religious leaders, and in Dharavi there are many private medical practitioners for practicing, so we also use them as influencers, and taxi drivers and the youth. one of the consideration when we designed the communication was actually we need to give a very technically sound, up to date, but a culturally appropriate information, and also an information in form of tips, practical tips, which community can actually follow those behaviors. You can go to next, Eldo. So we had around 200 COVID Yoddhas on board. Most of them are female and they are in the age group of 20 to 34 years. We're still engaged with them. We had an rigorous training programs. Every month we used to have a training program, and every week we used to have a meeting with them. Their role basically involved a health education in their community, awareness through home visits, and also leading the community campaign in their area, and referral to, if they find any symptomatic person, then convince that person to take the care and refer to a proper public health facility. So a lot of information was shared with them. One of the thing that we did is actually we launched a campaign and we had worked with a creative agency called Siriti, where we launched this campaign called Corona Gaya Nahi. And the whole name of this campaign came after we discussed with our Yoddhas, with the community, that we got a sense that people are still not feared. They think that the Corona is gone. And this was the time when the first wave was just getting over. So after this discussion, then we decided that we need to work around and generate some curiosity around, but still give proper messages. So we followed a very systematic steps where we decided the target segment, we defined the communication messages. We also pre-tested the communication material. I will talk about these phases. There were 3 phases we launched this campaign. One is the teaser phase. The second was where we generated the interest. And the third was actually where you purposefully respond to the questions in relation to COVID, where you go more in depth by answering the questions of the community. We can go next. So in the first, the teaser phase, where actually we create curiosity. We just wanted to create curiosity. Hasn't Corona gone? Means it's like it's still there. So you need to be aware. And during the discussions, we used a lot of this WhatsApp gifs and the posters. The crumpled paper was used, where usually when you show crumpled paper to someone and say that, then they will tend to open it, you know. So we use some of the innovative methodologies to create interest around, yes, Corona Gaya Nahi. That was the theme in the teaser phase. The second phase was actually where we wanted to generate a lot of interest, but simultaneously give information on the COVID appropriate behaviors. We actually created a huge mascot in the coronavirus looking like, and I will show you that in the next slide. We made some films in Hindi, where if you don't follow, so each film was based on a COVID appropriate behavior, that if you don't follow the COVID appropriate behavior, the virus will attack you. You know, those kind of films, those were shared on the WhatsApp by the COVID Yoddhas with the community. We also shared it with the community at large. We did a road show using this mascot. Mascot was taken in the Dharavi's lens. Dharavi has a very narrow lens, you know. And we did a road show where we actually took this mascot, and we gave some pamphlets on the information. We also made announcements through masjids. We used auto rickshaws. So different communication channels was being used simultaneously just to reinforce the COVID behaviors. We can go to next. And the third phase, which was the last phase of the campaign, where we had an LED van, you can see in the picture, and this mascot you can see, where we actually took this on the road. And here actually we created the functional poster. Functional posters means we laid emphasis on some of the, like, spitting is a very much an issue in Dharavi, and then in toilets, while using toilets, going out of the toilet, spitting, then fear, discrimination. A lot of Dharavi people were experiencing the stigma, because आप धारावी से हो तो काम पे नहीं आना, you know, those kind of a thing. So we try to address those through this, where we actually answer the questions, and but again we used one-to-one talks, then group meetings, home visits, WhatsApp messages. We can go to next window. We work with vendors because we realized and there are many small shops in Dharavi, many in thousands maybe. We realized that these are the places where the community usually gather in large numbers, and if we use them as effective stakeholder, as an influencer, we can make some change. So we approached around 492 shopkeepers in Dharavi area. We urged to them that if they wear the mask and they insist to their customers, then the customer will follow the same. We initially faced challenges because some of the vendors were not willing to do this, saying that they will lose the customers. But we keep focusing on working with them, and there was some success to it. Next, hello. We also, sanitation was again a big issue because there are only 22% of them have access to private toilets, like they have toilets in their homes. Other community use the public toilet in Dharavi. So we used, we mapped this toilet with help of our COVID Yoddhas. We also had meetings with the caretakers, because if the caretakers can influence the behavior, then nothing like it. Means like actually we have the battle won. Like if you're not wearing the mask, you will not be allowed to enter the toilet. And those kind of things actually we did. We also worked with BMC. Sanitation department, and there was a very good response from the sanitation department. We also worked with the AMC, the Additional Municipal Commissioner of Dharavi. This is a program reach. Again, I will not go into the numbers details. You can see the numbers. These are many people, number of people our Yoddhas have reached. So coming to the program impact, we looked at two things. One is COVID-19 information dose. How many of our community members are getting this information from how many sources? So you can see in the end line, which we did in April 2020, and the baseline happened in September. 84% of them, they said that it was the corona information dosage was improved. So they're getting more and more information. Then program recall, like COVID correct messages, how many of them able to recall? 78% of them were able to recall the correct messages of COVID. In the end line, you see the people who are following all three behaviors. Usually we see that only one or two behaviors have been followed, but we also looked at that how many of them are following all the behaviors. So we saw in end line that 83% of them are actually following all the behaviors. Next, Aldo. What needs to be now? So these are the two important things where our future work needs to happen. You can see that COVID-19 hesitancy, vaccine hesitancy, 37% are still hesitant. And this is an April data. And in terms of the perceived efficacy of the COVID-19 preventive practices, 48% of them only have this perceived efficacy. Thank you so much, and thanks to the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation and the George Institute for giving this opportunity on working on this wonderful initiative. We can take the questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susma ma'am. So we will have the questions towards the end. So we have one more speaker to go. Sure. But it's wonderful to hear from you how the community was engaged in forms of COVID Yoddha to lead campaigns on awareness and the improvement that was seen in terms of awareness in the community. Thanks, Susma ma'am. So our next speaker is Dr. Joseph Williams, who heads an experienced team of medical and non-medical professionals at the Projects Division of Voluntary Health Services, VHS. So Joseph is currently the project director for the COVID-19 Urban Slum Intervention Project, supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He and his team have used various approaches to screen and help people mitigate COVID-19 challenges in the urban slums of Chennai. So the focus has now shifted from Mumbai to Chennai, and he will take us through the learnings from providing holistic care to the community. Dr. Joseph, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And hello, and thank you all for choosing to spend your evening with us. And it's going to be time well spent learning and sharing together. It's always difficult to be the last speaker, especially when we've had excellent speakers just before me. But I think the themes are common. And I was listening to some of the key words like stigma, fear, awareness, toilets, people. And those are some of the themes whether north or south, Mumbai or Chennai, they remain the same. And we've been grappling with this over the last year as we've been dealing with the COVID pandemic. So the topic that's been assigned to me is the need for a holistic approach during COVID-19. However, what we felt as a team that this topic might be better defined as community engagement as the basis for public health programs. I also wanted to say it's probably by design that the organizers had asked us to speak last, simply because community engagement is really the last word and the hallmark of success or failure of any intervention that attempts to bridge the supply and demand equation. Next slide, please. So as I was reminiscing and thinking about community engagement, I thought this proverb, which I'm sure you've come across, that if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk together. And I think this to us really embodies and captures the essence of community engagement. However, this also poses a challenge almost as big as the COVID pandemic. As the pandemic broke out last year and there was a need for an urgent response, how do we walk fast, yet how do we walk far with communities that were battling with COVID? So we'd like to share with you over the next few slides what we have learned, and we think the key has been engagement with communities. Before I start delving into where we work and what sort of work we are doing, I'd like to just spend a second reflecting on that word engagement. You know, naturally, as all of us do, I turned to Google to try and understand this word engagement a little bit more, but it didn't really help. Finally, I think what really helped me to understand that word engagement was engagement is not a noun, but rather a verb. So the action that comes of engaging with communities, like gears coming together in harmony and synchrony for a common purpose, is a visual I'd like to leave in your mind as we go through our work here in Chennai. Kannagi Nagar, which is in zone 15 of South Chennai, lies right off the IT Expressway. The IT Expressway in Chennai houses all the multinationals, the software companies, all in glass and shiny steel buildings. Yet, a few minutes off this IT Expressway, we have this world apart of Kannagi Nagar, the largest urban resettlement in Chennai, which was started in 2004 during the earlier natural disaster of the tsunami, where slums in Chennai were being evicted and resettled in Kannagi Nagar. So in Kannagi Nagar, we have approximately 18,000 households with 72,000 population. As you would be well aware that most of them are daily wage earners, housemaids, drivers, construction workers, plumbers, sanitary workers, etc. The average income being around 200 to 400 rupees per day. Basically, the tenements built by the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, there are three types. All of them are almost around 600 square feet. And the three types are ground plus 1, ground plus 2, and ground plus 3. The striking feature here is, apart from the ground plus 1 and the ground plus 3, the ground plus 2 are shared toilets where people really have to come down from the upper floors to the ground floor and share a toilet. Again, depending on where these tenements are, the piped water is either once in 3 days or the lorry once a week. There is no portable drinking water to speak of, and most of the households depend on bottled water, spending almost up to 100 rupees a day on drinking water. Unfortunately, Kannagi Nagar has a reputation for crime, drug, violence, and lack of opportunities. The Madras High Court last year, in an observation, had asked the state government as to what steps were being taken by the state government to wean away the residents of Kannagi Nagar from a life of crime. So I think that itself speaks volumes of the environment, social environment that the inhabitants of Kannagi Nagar are in. I put there the wave 1 and 2. And as you can see, the wave 2 has been extremely severe. That's for the entire zone 15 and not specifically for Kannagi Nagar because we couldn't exactly get the disaggregate data for Kannagi Nagar. Another point, not just the numbers are outstanding from wave 1 and 2, but I also want to draw your attention that wave 1 was actually over a period of 10 months. Whereas the wave 2, the figures that you're seeing of 1,522 and 91 deaths are over the last 3 months. So the message there is that the wave 2 has been particularly severe and devastated these communities. Next, please, Eldo. So our work with the Gates Foundation, which started last year around August 2020, I think in vogue those days were, last year was the term to flatten the curve, not really knowing that we'd be faced with a second wave. So the goal was to flatten the curve of COVID-19 in the slum community of Kannagi Nagar. And how we had structured our team was to have a pyramid base of Nanbans or volunteers. And again, the majority of them being women, 40, and only 5 men. 3 field officers and M&E officers, 2 program coordinators, and again, the majority of them being women. A reason for this, I think, will be explained a little bit later in my discussion. The 4 major themes that we worked on were COVID, water sanitation, gender, and nutrition. I'll briefly run you through that and then come back to what we feel has been the key for community engagement. Next, please, Helga. In the next 4 slides, you're going to see a common theme across our intervention areas of COVID, nutrition, gender, water sanitation. All of our work starts with assessment, both structured, informal, dialogue with communities, dialogue with stakeholders, preparing material, making sure that we have training programs for our staff, for the communities, and ensuring that they're contextualized. And you can see that we have managed to ensure that awareness campaigns were disseminated to approximately 80% of these slum communities. So as with our other speakers and other programs in Mumbai, we have done various campaigns on mask usage, social distance, importance of vaccination. However, I think the point which I would like to take up from BJS also was that the majority of the cases, the 90% of the ILI cases that we identified were not through house visits, but rather through camps. And I think that's where the role of trained professionals has been critical. Next slide, please, Helga. Water sanitation, as you can imagine, the tenements, less than acceptable levels of sanitation and hygiene. Those pictures there in the top would give you an idea, not just restricted to Chennai, but anywhere in our country or in low resource settings. So our work was, again, working on building awareness and capacity of communities on sanitation, hand washing. We also thought that information plays a very critical role in empowering communities. So we pasted emergency contacts for the officials, for communities to reach out on their cell numbers of issues that they were facing with regard to water sanitation. We pasted this around in these tenements, and that really seemed to work in our favor, where communities were able to directly reach out to the concerned officials and ensure that they were accessing services. The posters, we built them around a theme. Sorry, one back, Eldo. We built them around a theme. So this was called Advice Alimelu, to attract the communities. As I was talking about, we had a process of assessment, building capacities, implementation of programs. It was not exactly sequential. Sometimes we did go back, as you can see here in our WASH. We went back and again did a study on the water composition, because as I said in my earlier slide, these communities were really spending almost 100 rupees per day on drinking water. And we were of the opinion of setting up water ATMs, which necessitated us to go back and do water assessment. So while we were following this sequence of assessments and interventions. There was a little bit back and forth based on our learning curve there. Next, please, Eldo. The next thematic area, as we said that the majority of our colleagues and field staff were women, right from these communities, gender blew up as being one of the critical issues to be dealt with. We did an assessment as to among our own colleagues as well as in the community and found out there was an enormous need to reach out and understand and begin to address the gender issues in this slum community. There was an article in the Times of India which picked up on our work, and I think the title of that actually beautifully captures the struggle that we faced and continue to face, that behind those colors hides Kannagi Nagar's dark side. And I'd encourage those of you who would like to have a deeper understanding of the gender issues in Kannagi Nagar to actually read that or reach out to us for the full report. So some of the activities that we have done, not only gender awareness on women's rights, but also ensured legal counseling for our own colleagues, which helped them to identify gender violence, reach out to lawyers, be networked with them, which culminated in a signature campaign for an all-women police station and a one-stop center for women that would look after their health, psychological, and legal rights. Next slide, please. Naturally, dealing with the lower socioeconomic concerns, nutrition has been one of the forefront issues as we work in Kannagi Nagar. Again, following the theme of assessment, working on materials and capacity, as well as intervention. So I'd like to end with, what has really been distilled as our learnings. Can we have the next slide, please, Eldo? These are our achievements, my apologies. The numbers, the qualitative will follow, but these were the quantitative outputs. Next slide, please, Eldo. And this is what I'd like to spend maybe a little bit more time on, the spectrum of community engagement. So while we started out trying to inform others that we were getting into the field and working on COVID prevention, consulting with them, involving them into the program, making sure that they were part of the design, taking that a step further and ensuring that there was a vibrant collaboration, and finally really leaving this in their community hands with empowerment through information and knowledge and access to the key stakeholders and influence makers, I think has been the cornerstone of our approach. And I'd like to end with the last photograph, if we can go there, which happened yesterday, 21st of June. And in the photograph, what is striking is we have the Minister of Health from Tamil Nadu, we have the Member of Parliament for South Chennai, and we also have the local MLA. But that's not the point I'm trying to emphasize here. The point that I'm trying to emphasize here is, happily, there was not even one single representation from VHS in this program. It was entirely conceived and implemented by the community and the field staff. And I think that speaks as to the power of empowering communities, people's health in people's hands, making sure that with knowledge, awareness, and information, they are able to access what are their rights to safeguard their livelihoods and their families. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Joseph. This is wonderful. I think provision of holistic care, community engagement, and the different phases of community engagement. So now with that, we have all of our speakers spoken, and we would be open for questions. So maybe I would just go with the first question to Maria. So Maria, Dharavi has sort of fared much better during the second wave of COVID when we compare it to the first wave last year. And I mean, there are many questions, why this is happening, what could be attributed to the low case count during the second wave. Any early insights to that?
I think it's been the collective efforts of communities, the local political leaders, and the various organizations that have been working in Dharavi, because in one of the presentations also we saw that initially people were not ready to come in for screening and testing. And another reason for that has also been that many of them migrated back to their villages and hometowns. But for how long would they have been able to do so? So, uh, uh, so the thing was that one has to live here for a longer period of time, and so getting back to work, getting some kind of livelihood, and also looking at other issues like education, etc. I think people have come to the conclusion that we cannot ignore some of the norms of COVID. So we have to work together to achieve this as a community. So, so I think those have been some of the reasons that the cases in Dharavi have been going low.
Thanks, Maria. Anyone of the speakers, does anyone have some insights to this?
Maybe I could just jump in for a minute. Thank you. I think those are excellent points. And I, since I'm speaking, I just wanted to take a moment to really thank all the speakers and just to underscore how important the community expertise was of the partners and understanding what to do and how to work with the community, how to engage. It was really so many lessons were learned, and I learned so much in all of our meetings. In terms of this last question, I do think that we don't understand fully reinfection and immunity, especially against variants. And I do think because so many people were infected in Dharavi initially, that many people probably had some protection for the second wave. We don't fully understand how much. We know it's certainly not 100%, but I think we are seeing that people are not largely getting reinfected. Individuals have been reinfected for sure, but it is rarer. And so I think there is some immunity that was playing a role as well. Over.
Thanks, Kayla. And because you're here, maybe the next question to you is, whenever there is a pandemic, it takes so much of effort to mobilize funds, to identify stakeholders, to link up with them, to see who are working and what they're working in. So can you put in some of your experiences and thoughts into that? How does that mechanism work,
So yeah, thank you. So I think that is one of the ways in which we were able to help as a foundation, because money is a little more nimble, maybe some less bureaucracy in terms of moving money out the door into an institution. But also we did leverage partners that we knew or where we already had a grant or had an active grant, so that we could pivot some of that work, or at least it was easy to kind of add further funds to that. But it does take time, and we have to, think ahead. We have to have those systems in place so that we can kind of activate them when we need them, because starting from scratch, even with the foundation, can take time. But I think a lot of it was leveraging existing partners, existing grooves of finances, so that we could move quickly.
Thanks, Kayla. Santilal sir, so now you have been very agile and you have been shifting, based on the needs of the communities. So any thoughts about vaccine hesitancy in Dharavi? Do you find there is vaccine hesitancy? And if yes, then how do you plan to sort of address this?
Yeah, there is a huge vaccine hesitancy in Dharavi, as I explained. First 1 month, there was actually no people were coming forward for vaccination. Therefore, we tried different ideas to educate people, to support people, to help people. So therefore, we have started some help desk in Dharavi. Now we made some announcement through masjids and all these things. That also we did. Then there are different associations, traders association, jeweler association, doctor association. So we are requesting them, and the administration is also supporting a lot. So now there are 2 vaccination centers. So I requested Honorable Chief Minister to provide us vaccines, because last 1.5 months there was a shortage of vaccines. So definitely we are ready to take this challenge, and I respect all other organizations, whichever here they showed their presentation. All are working very hard in Dharavi, and I must say that, because it is not a small job, it is a big 1 million population in 2 square kilometer. It's one of the largest dense population area of the world. So all these organizations are working day and night, and just because of you people, we can more focus and more share our own experiences in Dharavi particularly, and we can work together also in Dharavi. So that is also possible in Dharavi, and we are ready to because one question, last question was there, why this second wave has not much impacted. So one of the reason is government is prepared, NGOs are prepared, and people are also prepared. So that is the biggest benefit for everybody. So now we are also prepared for we are also preparing for third wave. So if in third wave such type of a great experiences shared by all other organizations, I really grateful to you, and they should work together in hand, and how we can work together. That is also one of the point which we can discuss in future, just outcome of this webinar.
Sure. So we have 3 more minutes, and just conscious of the time, Santilal sir has raised an important question of involving faith actors. So continuing that question, Dr. Joseph, in your experience, was there any role and impact of faith actors? And if yes, where did these faith leaders actually obtain their signs from? So are there any mechanisms where they have properly been informed? Sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you, Praveen. We work directly with the communities and women's groups as well as other stakeholders. So I really can't answer from our Chennai experience as to how we work with the religious stakeholders in this point, because this was more through the healthcare service delivery and directly with the community. So my apologies for my inability.
No, that's fine. Anyone else? Does they want to take this question?
Praveen, actually, I would like to share some of our experience. What we have seen is the religious leaders are the big influencers in some cases. And there is a myth, there are many myths which are going around by different groups where like it is going to make you important, very common, which is going around, which we need to address. We also seen that whether to take vaccine or not, sometimes the elders in the family influence your decision. If elders are not convinced that, so we need to work with the elders also sometimes. We have also seen that among the women, the hesitancy is more. And so that is also need to be addressed. Yeah, of course, so the hesitancy is, we really need to have a multidimensional approach to work with hesitancy. One of the things is that people also in Dharavi, we have seen that we will talk to our family doctors, and that family doctors can be from any pathy. They can be Jhola Shab, they can be. So we need to address this private providers who are the small doctors also, who are also actually may not be giving the right kind of information to the community. So because many of them, when we talk, they said we will talk to our family doctor and decide whether to take the vaccine or not. So there are many influencers which are underplaying, and we need to work with them.
Great. Sure. Thanks, Susma ma'am. So yeah, we have it's 7:30 already. So maybe I'll take a minute just to thank all the speakers for their wonderful contributions, for sharing their experiences. in doing this wonderful job, in addressing COVID. So it's with a team effort that we have been sort of successful, if I may say, as of now, and going forward, this team efforts needs to be continued. So we are planning to develop a small blog around this webinar, and there are a few questions that are still unanswered. We will get back to the speakers, and we will respond to those queries and questions on the blog. So I thank you very much again, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Praveen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Dr. and Dr. Praveen. Thank you.